Alright, so with our suspension back together, basically a couple of things that we're going to do extra just to ensure that we get good clearance because we're running a pretty big tire on this vehicle is we've got our spacers right here. I've already fitted the spacers. Whenever you go with about 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, usually you're going to have to trim down your studs a little bit. So I've already taken care of that. The next thing that we're going to do is if we peel this guy back right here, we're going to do what's called a seam weld mod. And what that is we've got a seam weld that runs up here, and it's very typical for these vehicles to for the tire to get into there a little bit. So all we're going to do is notch this guy back a couple of times, and then we're just going to push everything over and then take the liner and tap it straight in. That way it pushes it back, gives us about another 1/2 inch of clearance. Alright, so as you can see right here, here's where we notched everything out. Now we're just going to take some self-etching primer, just any self-etching primer will do. And we're going to go ahead and paint all this. That way we can sort of seal all the metal that we just cut into. Alright, so with our strut back together, all our suspension components back together, we've got our wheel spacer on. And then we finished our interior fender mod. We'll just move over to the other side and do the same thing. I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll just show you the back. Alright, so moving to the back, here's what we're going to do. Disconnect your shock at the bottom. You're going to disconnect all your arms, essentially. You're going to disconnect this one, and this one. Key points here, make sure you go ahead and loosen this rear brake line cable, and then make sure you disconnect your speed sensor cable right here, and then make sure you pay attention to how far down you're letting your parking brake cables swing. All three of those items, very important not to overextend them and break them. So let's go ahead and get right into it. And with a little bit of influence, your stock spring comes out. Now one thing you want to make certain of is that whenever you go to reinstall this spring, is that you have it pitched the exact same way it came out. Reason being, this can cause ride issues, and then also the spring won't sit in there right. Next, all we do is remove our factory shock. And there's that. Factory shock replaced. We just go ahead and throw this guy right in there. Another thing that's really important to pay attention to is how all of your wiring and everything is going to be running. The speed sensor is going to be connected to this arm up here, so we want to make sure to run it towards the front and not behind the shock. So with the shock in place, all we got to do is throw in our new coil and then put everything back together. Alright, and we'll just get it all back together. After that, go ahead and torque everything to spec, throw your wheels on, we're good to roll. And that wraps it up. Great install. The Jeep looks great. That's one thing about these WK2s is that you put a little bit of a lift on it, just a tad bit bigger tire, slightly aggressive offset, and I mean you've got a great looking Jeep. First off, on the fitment, this is actually a plus 30 wheel on the offset, and so we went with an 1.25 inch wheel spacer to go ahead and move it over to a 0 offset, and that's just because we really wanted this wheel, but it didn't come in the offset that we wanted with the size that we wanted. So if you're gonna do wheel spacers on your wheels, just make sure that you're very careful on what you select. Make sure it's an American-made product. Make sure it's at least 6061 T6 or above billet aluminum, and then also make sure that the studs, they are forged studs, US made. of course. That way you make sure you get a quality product. For more information on Old Man Emu suspension products or ARB products, go to www.chuckstrucks.com. And dirty as always, this is Michael. Thank you for watching.